What if the moment you stopped explaining yourself was the moment everything started shifting in your favor? There's a kind of power most people overlook because it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't argue, chase, or try to prove a point. It simply pulls back. And in that space, something unexpected happens. The person who once felt certain about losing you starts to feel uncertain, curious, even unsettled. Quiet energy isn't about being cold or distant. It's about becoming so grounded in yourself that you no longer feel the need to react to every emotion, every message, every silence. And ironically, that's what makes your presence unforgettable. Think about it. When you stop over-explaining, stop seeking validation, and stop trying to be understood, people start paying closer attention because now there's mystery, there's self-control, there's a shift they can't quite figure out. In this video, we're going to break down exactly how this quiet energy works and why it has such a deep psychological impact. Because once you understand this, you'll never feel the need to chase again. And that's when everything changes. Have you ever noticed how the loudest reactions often get ignored, but the quietest ones leave people thinking for days? Silence has a way of creating space. And in that space, the mind starts to wander. When you're constantly explaining yourself, defending your feelings, or trying to be understood, you remove all mystery. Everything is laid out, predictable, easy to process. But the moment you choose silence, something shifts. Now, there are unanswered questions. Now, there's curiosity. And curiosity is powerful. When a man expects a reaction from you, an emotional message, a long explanation, or even frustration, and you give him none of that, it interrupts his pattern. He's used to knowing where he stands. He's used to your energy being available. But when that energy becomes calm, reserved, and selective, it forces him to reflect in a way words never could. Silence also communicates self-respect. It says without saying anything, I don't need to convince you of my value. And that message hits deeper than any paragraph ever will. Because when someone feels your absence of effort, they begin to question what changed. And more importantly, why it changed. But here's the key. This only works when your silence is genuine. Not a tactic to get a reaction, not a silent treatment meant to punish, but a natural result of you choosing peace over chaos. People can feel the difference. Forced silence creates tension, but grounded silence creates impact. And the truth is, words can be debated, dismissed, or misunderstood. Silence can't. Silence lingers. It echoes. It makes someone sit with their own thoughts and often their own regrets. So instead of asking, what should I say to make him understand me? The real shift is asking, what happens when I stop trying to explain at all? Because sometimes the most powerful message you can send is no message. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop losing yourself in how someone else feels about you. A lot of people misunderstand this. They think detachment is cold, distant, or even manipulative. But real emotional detachment is actually grounded, calm, and self-respecting. It's the ability to feel your emotions without letting them control your actions. It's choosing not to react impulsively, not to chase clarity, and not to seek reassurance from someone who's inconsistent. When a man senses that your mood is no longer tied to his attention, something shifts. Before, he may have felt that he had emotional access to you anytime through a text, a call, or even silence. But now, there's a boundary. Not a harsh one, but a clear one. Your energy is no longer available on demand. This doesn't mean you ignore him or act indifferent. It means you respond instead of react. You take your time. You prioritize your peace. You stop overanalyzing every message or lack of one. And most importantly, you stop making his behavior the center of your emotional world. There's a quiet confidence in that kind of detachment. It shows that you're emotionally stable, that your happiness isn't dependent on external validation. And that's what makes it powerful, because it's rare. People are used to emotional intensity, to unpredictability, to reactions. But when you become steady, when you become composed, you stand out in a completely different way. And here's the truth. Emotional detachment doesn't push the right people away. It reveals who was only there when you were easy to access. When you master this, you're no longer trying to hold on to someone. You're simply allowing them to meet you where you are, or not at all. There's a subtle shift that changes everything, and it happens the moment you stop looking to him for approval. When you're constantly seeking validation, your energy becomes outward. You start measuring your worth through his responses, how quickly he texts back, how he reacts to your words, whether he shows interest or pulls away. And without realizing it, you hand over control of your emotions to someone who hasn't earned that level of influence. But the moment you take that power back, everything changes. No longer seeking his validation doesn't mean you don't care what he thinks. It means his opinion no longer defines how you feel about yourself. You're not waiting for his approval to feel attractive, valued, or enough. You already decided that for yourself. And that confidence is quiet but undeniable. When a man senses that you're no longer trying to impress him, something shifts internally. He can't rely on the same patterns anymore. You're not over-explaining, not trying to prove your worth, not adjusting yourself to keep his attention. Instead, you're simply being grounded, secure, and self-assured. This creates a kind of tension he's not used to. Because now, instead of you seeking his validation, he starts seeking yours. You choose when to engage. You choose what you accept. And you're no longer bending your standards just to keep a connection alive. The truth is, validation loses its power the moment you stop needing it. And when you genuinely reach that place, your presence changes. You're no longer trying to be chosen. You already chose yourself. That's what makes this behavior so impactful. It doesn't demand attention, but it naturally attracts it. There's a huge difference between reacting and responding, and most people don't realize how much this one shift can completely change the dynamic. Reacting is instant, it's emotional, it's driven by impulse. You feel something and you immediately express it. Whether it's frustration, anxiety, or the urge to fix things right away. And in those moments, you're not in control. Your emotions are. But responding, that's power. Responding means you pause, you process, you choose your words and your timing instead of letting the moment choose for you. It's not about suppressing how you feel. It's about not letting your feelings rush you into actions you might regret later. When you react, especially to mixed signals or inconsistency, you often reveal how invested you are. You send long messages, you seek clarity, you try to resolve everything immediately. And while it may feel honest, it can also create a pattern where your emotional availability is predictable. But when you respond, you create space. You don't jump to reply the second he texts. You don't feel pressured to explain yourself right away. You take your time. Not as a strategy, but because your peace matters more than urgency. And that shift alone changes how you're perceived. Now, instead of being emotionally reactive, you come across as composed, thoughtful, and in control. And that kind of energy is rare. It signals maturity, it signals self-respect, it also creates curiosity. Because when someone can't predict your reactions, they start paying closer attention. They become more aware of their own behavior. They think twice. And here's the deeper truth. Responding instead of reacting protects you. It keeps you from over-investing too quickly. It prevents emotional burnout. It allows you to stay grounded no matter what the other person is doing. So the next time you feel that urge to immediately reply, explain, or react, pause. Not everything needs an instant response. Not everything deserves your emotional energy. Because the more intentional you become with your responses, the more powerful your presence becomes. And that's when people start to feel the difference. One of the most powerful shifts you can make isn't about him at all. It's about you. When you start prioritizing your own growth, your energy naturally redirects. Instead of focusing on what he's doing, what he's thinking, or how he feels about you, your attention moves inward. And that's where real transformation begins. Because here's the truth. The more you center your life around someone else, the more you lose your sense of direction. Your mood becomes dependent on their actions. Your time gets shaped around their availability. And slowly, without even noticing, you stop investing in yourself the way you once did. But when you flip that dynamic, everything changes. Prioritizing your growth means you're no longer waiting for someone to choose you. You're actively choosing yourself every single day. You're building your confidence, expanding your mindset, focusing on your goals, your health, your passions. You're becoming someone who feels fulfilled from within, not someone who relies on external attention to feel complete. And that shift is powerful because it's visible. People can sense when your life has depth, when you're busy creating, learning, evolving. You're no longer constantly available, not because you're trying to be distant, but because your world no longer revolves around one person. And this is where something interesting happens. When a man sees that you're genuinely moving forward, without chasing, without waiting, it creates a sense of contrast. He starts to notice the difference between who you were when you were focused on him and who you are now that you're focused on yourself. And often, that's when regret begins to build. Not because you tried to make him feel it, but because your growth made it undeniable. But here's the most important part. You don't grow for him. You grow for you. Because regardless of what he does, who he becomes, or whether he comes back, your evolution is something no one can take away from you. And when you truly step into that mindset, you're no longer trying to hold on to someone. You're too focused on becoming someone even you're proud of. There's a kind of strength that doesn't need to be seen, announced, or explained. And this is it. Most people, when they decide to move on, feel the urge to make it known. They post about it, hint at it, or try to show how unaffected they are. But real detachment doesn't perform. It doesn't seek an audience. It simply moves forward. Moving on without announcement is powerful because it's quiet and it's real. You're not trying to prove that you're over him. You're not dropping subtle messages hoping he notices. You're not looking for a reaction at all. Instead, your focus has shifted so completely onto your own life that the need to be seen by him fades naturally. And that's what makes it different. Because when someone expects you to linger, to wait, or to somehow stay emotionally available, and instead you're just gone, it creates a kind of absence they can't easily ignore. There's no closure speech, no dramatic ending, no final explanation, just distance. And that distance speaks in a way words never could. It makes him wonder when it happened, how it happened, why he didn't notice the shift sooner. Because from his perspective, there was no clear moment to hold on to, no obvious turning point, just a gradual realization that you're no longer where he left you. But this only works when it's genuine. If you're moving on while secretly hoping he'll notice and come back, your energy will still be tied to him, and people can feel that. True moving on is internal first. It's when your emotional attachment loosens, your focus changes, and your life continues with or without his presence. You stop checking, stop waiting, stop wondering. Not because you're forcing yourself to, but because you no longer feel the need to. And here's the truth. The most impactful exit isn't the one that makes noise. It's the one that creates silence he can't fill. Because when you move on without announcement, you're not just leaving the situation. You're leaving behind the version of you that was willing to settle for less. So why do these quiet behaviors hit so deeply? Why do they create a sense of regret that loud reactions, emotional messages, or constant effort never could? It comes down to contrast. When someone is used to having access to you, your attention, your energy, your emotional reactions, and that suddenly changes, it creates a gap. And the human mind doesn't like gaps. It tries to fill them with questions, with memories, with what-ifs. Before, everything felt certain. He knew how you would respond. He knew you cared. He knew on some level that you were there. But when your behavior shifts into calm, detachment, self-respect, and quiet confidence, that certainty disappears, and in its place, reflection. He starts replaying moments, not just what happened, but how you made him feel. The consistency, the warmth, the presence you once gave so freely. And now that it's gone, or at least no longer available in the same way, it gains value. Because people often don't fully recognize something when it's constant. They recognize it when it's missing. These behaviors also remove pressure. When you stop chasing, stop demanding explanations, and stop trying to force clarity, you give the other person space. And in that space, they're no longer reacting to you. They're facing themselves. That's where regret grows. Not from being told what they lost, but from realizing it on their own. And here's something important. Regret isn't always immediate. It builds over time. It shows up in quiet moments, in comparisons, in the realization that what they had with you wasn't easy to replace. But none of this happens when you're still overgiving, over-explaining, or holding on tightly. It happens when you release control, when your energy becomes steady, when your actions align with self-respect, and when your life continues without needing their validation. It creates a version of you that feels different, stronger, calmer, more grounded. And that version is the one they start to miss. Not because you tried to make them regret losing you, but because your absence revealed the value they overlooked. Now, here's the part most people don't want to hear. Sometimes, without realizing it, the very things you do to keep him are the same things pushing him away. One of the biggest mistakes is over-pursuing. When you're always the one reaching out, always trying to fix the distance, always making the effort to keep the connection alive, it creates an imbalance. Instead of building attraction, it can start to feel like pressure. And pressure rarely brings someone closer. It makes them step back. Another common mistake is over-explaining. You feel misunderstood, so you try to clarify everything. You send long messages, you repeat your intentions, you try to make him see your perspective. But the more you explain, the less space you leave for him to feel your absence. And without that space, there's nothing for him to reflect on. Then there's emotional reacting, letting every shift in his behavior dictate your mood. If he pulls back, you chase. If he's distant, you try harder. If he's inconsistent, you become more available. This creates a pattern where your energy is predictable, and predictability in this context reduces intrigue. Another mistake, lowering your standards to maintain the connection. accepting inconsistent behavior, making excuses for his lack of effort, or convincing yourself that this is just how he is. Over time, this doesn't strengthen the bond, it weakens your position in it. And finally, trying to prove your worth. Whether it's through constant effort, being overly accommodating, or trying to be everything he wants, this approach often backfires. Because value isn't proven through overgiving. It's recognized through presence, boundaries, and self-respect. The truth is, attraction isn't built through force. It's built through balance. When you're constantly leaning in, there's no room for him to step forward. When you're always available, there's nothing to miss. And when you're doing all the work, there's nothing for him to invest in. So instead of asking, what more can I do to keep him? The better question is, what patterns do I need to stop repeating? Because sometimes the shift isn't about doing more. It's about doing less and allowing things to reveal themselves naturally. Staying in your power isn't about one strong moment of confidence. It's about consistency in how you treat yourself, especially when emotions are high. Most people lose their power not in calm situations, but in emotional ones. When they feel ignored, confused, or uncertain, they abandon their standards just to get relief. They text first. They over-explain. They settle for less attention than they actually need. And in that moment, it feels like relief. But long-term, it weakens self-trust. So how you stay in your power consistently? It starts with emotional discipline. That means not making decisions based on temporary feelings. Just because you feel anxious doesn't mean you need to act. Just because someone is distant doesn't mean you need to chase clarity immediately. Power is built in the pause, in that space between feeling something and responding to it. Next is self-prioritization. When you are consistently in your power, your life doesn't stop because of someone else's behavior. You continue your routines. You continue your goals. You continue your growth. Not as a distraction, but as a foundation. Because your identity is not built around someone else's attention. Another key is boundaries without explanation. You don't need to over-justify what you will or won't accept. You simply align your actions with your standards. If something doesn't feel right, you adjust your distance quietly, without drama, without long emotional speeches. And perhaps the most important part, stop resetting your worth based on how someone treats you in the moment. Consistency in your power means understanding that your value doesn't increase when they show interest, and it doesn't decrease when they pull away. You remain the same, steady, unshaken. Because the moment your self-worth depends on external behavior, you step out of your power. But when you stay grounded, when your actions are intentional, your emotions are regulated, and your focus is on your own direction, you stop being reactive energy and start becoming stable presence. And that kind of presence doesn't chase, it doesn't panic, it doesn't collapse under uncertainty. It simply stands firm. And over time, that consistency becomes your strongest form of attraction. Because people can feel when someone is no longer available to be pulled off their center. At the end of all of this, the real message isn't about making someone regret losing you. It's about returning to yourself. Because when you step back and look at everything we've covered, you realize none of these behaviors are about strategy in the way people usually think. They're about alignment, emotional balance, self-respect, and the quiet decision to stop abandoning yourself for attention, clarity, or validation from someone else. If there's one thing to take from this, it's that power doesn't come from chasing the right response. It comes from no longer needing one to feel okay. When you stop over-explaining, you protect your peace. When you stop reacting instantly, you regain control. When you stop seeking validation, you reclaim your identity. And when you focus on your growth, you naturally rise above situations that once felt overwhelming. And something interesting happens when you operate from that place. You stop trying to be chosen, and instead, you start choosing yourself. You stop asking, why isn't he seeing my worth? And start asking, why am I still trying to be seen by someone who already showed me where I stand? That shift is everything. Because the truth is, people don't always value what they have in the moment, but they always notice the absence of it. And when your presence is no longer available in the same emotional way, it creates reflection. Not because you forced it, but because you stepped out of imbalance. But the deeper win here isn't whether someone regrets losing you or comes back. It's that you no longer collapse emotionally based on their behavior. You become steady, clear, grounded. You build a life that doesn't revolve around uncertainty, and you stop repeating patterns that pull you out of your own center. So if there's a final takeaway, let it be this. The most powerful version of you is not the one trying to get someone to realize your worth. It's the one who already knows it and lives accordingly. Because once you reach that point, you're no longer waiting for closure, validation, or recognition. You are the closure, and everything else simply becomes optional.